Thank you, Mr. Bro. Any further questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. I next call up I'd call up panel 3, the local government case studies. And we have David Augustine, the tax collector for the City and County of San Francisco, Bridget Powers, a council member from the City of Auburn, Paul Aravallo, the City Manager for the City of West Hollywood, Maribel Louie, Arts and Economic Development Manager from the City of West Hollywood. We've asked this panel to discuss what has happened in each of their jurisdictions amongst a number of issues, including zoning or safety or permitting or complaints, and then talk about what their jurisdiction is doing to handle these issues. Have they updated ordinances, and if so, how? Did they develop new policy and ordinances? And do they have any other recommendations for other local agencies as they start to look at these issues as well? And we'll go ahead and start with Mr. Augustine.
Good afternoon. I'm David Augustine, tax collector for the City and County of San Francisco. My department, the Office of Treasurer and Tax Collector, has charter authority and obligation to collect both property and business taxes in San Francisco, including the TOT. The office takes this responsibility seriously and has worked hard and successfully to fairly and efficiently implement our local business and tax regulations code. Our code provisions around TOT liability and collection are strong, and we have the tools necessary to collect every dollar of taxes owed to the City and County of San Francisco. In 2012, our office promulgated a regulation clarifying both website companies and hosts are jointly and severally responsible for the payment of the full amount of TOT for any short-term residential rentals. In the intervening time since that regulation, the office has worked to understand the short-term residential rental industry and has put forward filing instructions and information for both website companies and hosts so they can more easily meet their tax filing and payment obligations. We recognize that many of our business tax collection procedures are complex for operators of short-term residential rentals or hosts, so we've made a number of changes to facilitate compliance. We've created a special webpage for hosts with information and FAQs about the tax-related requirements, including getting a business registration certificate, applying for a certificate of authority, and filing and paying taxes monthly on our website. This information is available at www.sftreasurer.org/hosts. We have changed business registration application form to capture the short-term residential rental hosts as a category, and we've created a separate queue for hosts in our account services unit to provide specialized communication and customized service. We have also worked to facilitate tax compliance from website companies and to make it easier for website companies to collect and remit TOT on behalf of hosts. The basic requirements for a website company are the same as those for hosts. First, register the business. 2, get a certificate of authority. And finally, file and pay your TOT monthly. We have created a category called a qualified website company to allow a company to relieve their hosts of several tax burdens, including getting a certificate of authority and monthly filing of TOT. In addition to the 3 requirements just listed above, the website company must submit a monthly filing that collects additional required information, such as the physical location of the rental, the name of the host, and the dates and gross amounts received for the transaction, and commit to collect and remit TOT on behalf of all of the hosts. Since the TOT is a joint and several liability between the host and the website company, this level of detail is critical in order to match a short-term residential rental transaction between a website company and a host, so that we can relieve the hosts of tax liability if and when a website company pays on their behalf. Right now in San Francisco, we have no qualified website companies. Because there are no qualified website companies, to date, this office is unable to verify the website company has satisfied for itself or for hosts the TOT obligation that is owed for each rental transaction. That means our office is obligated to seek payment of TOT from both hosts and website companies, even if a website company is collecting TOT from guests at the time of the transaction. This can be very frustrating and expensive for hosts, and it's imperative that website companies provide the required information to our office so they're not placing an undue burden on their clients. This wraps up my prepared remarks, but I'm of course happy to take any questions. And one additional detail, because of taxpayer confidentiality, I'm not permitted to disclose anything particular about any individual taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Powers?
Hi, thank you. My name is Bridget Powers on the Auburn City Council. And during my term as mayor last year, we spent an entire year working.
Ms. Powers, could you check if your mic is on?
How's that?
Perfect. I think that's
better?
A little bit better. Yep, thank you.
Do I need to repeat myself? Anyway, we recently approved a new ordinance on February 12th of 2015. I was asked 4 questions to answer to kind of give you an idea of the process that we went through. I'll answer those questions, and then if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them as well. My city attorney, Michael Colantuno, who is also here today, who helped us through this year-long process. The city of Auburn has a population of 13,330 and is known for its California Gold Rush history, with its Old Town registered as a California historical landmark. Auburn is part of Greater Sacramento area and is home to the Auburn State Recreation Park area. The park is a site of more sporting endurance events than any other place in the world, giving Auburn the undisputed and internationally acclaimed title of Endurance Capital of the World. Examples include the Western States 100-mile endurance run, the Tevis Ride, and other runs and equestrian events, as well as Auburn International Half Marathon triathlons. According to the United States Census, the city has a total of 7.2 square miles. With limited accommodations in Auburn, there has been a growing number of Airbnb and other similar types of lodging facilities being offered, none of which are permitted by our city's zoning ordinance. Due to the relatively growing number of facilities in operation, a local contingent of operators and/or supporters urged the City Council to consider adopting a short-term stay ordinance. On August 25, 2014, the City Council unanimously directed staff to initiate an ordinance amendment for short-term stays and bed and breakfasts. After conducting public hearings at the Planning Commission and City Council, the City of Auburn adopted a short-term rental ordinance on January 12, 2015, and it went into effect on February 12, 2015. In conducting research and speaking with other jurisdictions, thank you to the City of San Francisco and Airbnb that had approved short-term rentals, it had come to staff's attention that with the imposition of appropriate development standards regarding noise, parking, there appeared to be little evidence that short-term rentals were an incompatible land use in the residential zones. That is, jurisdictions had received relatively few complaints about the operation of short-term rentals. The City of Auburn adopted the short-term ordinance for the residential zones, including the city's, I'll slow down. The City of Auburn adopted a short-term rental ordinance on February 12, 2015 for the residential zones, utilizing the city's administrative permitting process. This ordinance was developed in consultation with a number of jurisdictions that had permitted short-term rentals. Staff consulted with these jurisdictions as to ascertain how well their ordinance was working and what, if any, pitfalls they had experienced. The goal behind the ordinance was to allow a permitting process for short-term rentals while protecting the integrity of the residential zones. Short-term rentals may be permitted in residential zones subject to certain development standards that a few of you have already mentioned today that you have initiated in your cities. We consulted with cities and counties that have experience with short-term rentals and that have dealt with them for a number of years. We had been dealing with this for about 5 years, and it went unnoticed until a couple properties were doing it in an unsafe manner, and so it came to our attention, and then those who were having the short-term stays wanted it to become allowable within the city limits. And so we spoke with code enforcement officers regarding their experience on what issues they are consistently dealing with, and then we drafted our ordinance to address these issues. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is that we actually do not charge TOT tax as of yet. We would like to. We're going to be working with our city manager and our community to get something on the ballot for 2016, as well as our TOT tax is one of those lower ones at 8%, and we're going to consider increasing that to 10%. And also working to make sure that we help our Airbnb and other VRBOs help to encourage paying the TOT tax. And that conducts my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Powers. Next is Mr. Aravallo and Ms. Louie from the City of West Hollywood.
Thank you for having us here today. I am Paul Aravallo. I'm the city manager for the City of West Hollywood. To my right is Maribel Louie. She is the Art and Economic Development Manager for the City of West Hollywood. West Hollywood is a very small city. We're 2 square miles. We're on the heart of the west side of Los Angeles. We're a densely populated city. We have about 30,000 residents. We have 30,000 people who come into the city every day to work. We have entertainment districts that bring in another 20 to 30,000 people on a daily basis. Our population can swell up to 400,000 people for major events. We're a very active community. We're surrounded by Beverly Hills to the west. We have the Hollywood Hills to the north and Los Angeles to the south. Our major industries are entertainment, tourism, hospitality, and high-end retail. The City of West Hollywood, we have core values that include seeking innovations and improved solutions to providing public services. We also recognize economic development and changes to economic development with the shared economy. Right now, the City of West Hollywood does not allow for the short-term rentals in our community. The municipal code does not permit it. It's something that we consider outside the code. We feel it's important to be proactive. We have engaged the different shared economy industries. We've had conversations with them, and yet our position at this point is to continue not to allow them within the City of West Hollywood. Our major revenue generator for the City of West Hollywood is hotel taxes. Right now, our hotels and T-bid assessments come in somewhere around $22 million a year in revenue for the city, which is a very significant revenue stream. We're at about 95% occupancy in the city, so our hotels are very busy. We have only 2,000 rooms. However, we have about 1,000 new hotel rooms that are online, and about 300 of those are in construction now. One of the challenges and one of the reasons we do not want to venture into the shared housing platform is in West Hollywood. We have approximately 17,000 units of rent-stabilized housing. That represents 70% of our housing stock. We feel that the type of shared housing targets those particular units and jeopardizes that program for the city. Right now, a one-bedroom unit in the City of West Hollywood will rent for about $1,500 a month, and that's a rent-controlled unit, a rent-stabilized unit. A market rate unit will be in excess of $2,500 a month. Some of the challenges we've had in terms of the shared housing, we have received a number of complaints. Over the past 6 months, we've had 13 complaints. We have 19 active cases. primarily working with the property owners and neighbors who file complaints about the temporary housing in those units. Maribel Louie, at the direction of the City Council, put together a forum, an engagement forum that we worked with businesses and community members in the City of West Hollywood. And through this process, we had a number of task force meetings. One of them was particular focus on housing. And Maribel's going to talk a little bit about that process and some of the findings that were generated from the report, both from West Hollywood stakeholders as well as the industries. Thank you.
Good afternoon. The formation of the task force was something that we undertook very, very carefully. We were very aware from the very beginning that we were learning as part of this process, and our residents and commissioners and everyone involved would go through that learning process with us. So we were very careful to make sure that we were providing information to everyone about, one, what the city's obligations are currently with short-term rentals, and then in addition to that, really wanted to understand from residents their experiences, both those who are property owners that want to participate in the sharing economy, as well as those that are experiencing the customers of the sharing economy as their neighbors on a temporary basis. The task force was composed of members of our existing commissions as well as representatives from the business community. The specific commissions involved were members of the Transportation Commission, Business License Commission, as well as the Planning Commission. The West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce was participating in the task force as well, and Visit West Hollywood, which is our local tourism business improvement district, wholly represented by the whole hotel industry. Expert panels were structured. In our case, our task force looked at the sharing economy as a whole. So we looked at rideshare services as well as short-term rentals. So we had separate expert panels for each topic. Airbnb and a local rental alliance, the Los Angeles Short-Term Rental Alliance, which is an alliance that is representative of property owners that participate in these programs, came and participated throughout the entire process with us. And they served as expert panel representatives to the task force. The community was also heavily involved. While this was not a Brown-acted task force, we did everything we could to actively notice the meetings. Our council members made announcements at regular council meetings prior to each meeting occurring. The dates of the meetings were promoted on the city's website and calendar. We had a very active presence online through the city's website, which is our main portal of communication to the public. We created a website specific to the Shared Economy Task Force. And we also used a new platform for us, EngageWeHo.com, which is part of a Mind Mixer. It's powered by Mind Mixer. And that allowed us to really solicit ideas and comments from the community, and it allowed us to learn some interesting information that I think I'll touch upon later in my comments. The steps that we use are similar to a lot of policy formation. Our first meeting with them, we brought the task force together, explained to them what each of their specific roles were as part of this committee, and gave them policy briefings. Where are we now? What do we have? We gave them briefings from a legal services standpoint. So our legal services division staff came and explained our existing ordinances. Our code compliance staff gave them an overview of existing cases and our existing procedure for monitoring these particular types of businesses, and economic development staff provided additional data as requested. We also did some case study reviews. We were looking at the time that the City of San Francisco or the County of San Francisco and what they were doing, and looked at what other cities had been doing as well. At the time, we were studying the proceedings at the City of New York and the State of New York and how they were handling different issues, and our task force was very interested in learning what was happening around the country. We spent a good portion of our time with them also forming questions, and really what we facilitated in the end were conversations. The task force was very interested in hearing from the public, so the public also was able to offer questions to the task force and said, we would love for you to take a look at, allowing it in certain cases, perhaps in single-family homes, or perhaps just with condos, or perhaps a lot of different sort of iterations were presented to the task force, and they collectively gathered that information and then tasked the staff to formulate questions. And we shared those questions in advance with the expert panels that came to present to us so that they could provide specific responses to those questions. Draft policy recommendation meetings were also held, as well as final policy recommendation meetings, and then subsequently a council meeting. I want to reiterate that, again, at each step of this process, it was a public meeting, and the public was very much encouraged and noticed as to what not just the topic was going to be, but really the nuances of what that communication and conversation was going to be. And there were portions of the meeting that were specifically dedicated to public comment as well. I understand that you are interested in recommendations based on our experience as to what we would recommend other cities that are considering facilitating such a conversation can undertake. It was important for our task force that they consider both the business perspective of this model as well as the resident perspective. What was interesting is as the formality of having a transportation commissioner and a business license commissioner and a planning commissioner, as well as representatives from the business community, some of these members actually owned properties that were being listed on some of these sites. Some of them were consumers of these platforms, and so they had really that first-hand experience, and it really helped to actually contribute to the dialogue and give it a lot of substance and help them be very thoughtful in their process from all the different vantage points that we felt were very important. And you could really see, if we had recorded the conversations, I would encourage you to see that, see the videos, but we didn't, unfortunately. But the part that was really interesting was for somebody to say, to witness a commissioner, for example, saying, I've used these services, but when I think about it, and I enjoy it, and it's really helpful, and it's convenient, and all the positive things that we've heard today about it, but when the person reflected on it as a resident, and thinking about it as a person who was living next to them, using a space in their particular residential property, and they lived in a multifamily unit, their entire understanding of the implications of these types of businesses in our community transformed. And collectively as a body, they came to the conclusion that while TOT is something that's important, while even an individual's ability to use their own assets to augment their income had a valuable part of the conversation, it was at the compromise of a lot of quality of life and safety issues for neighbors that they felt could not be addressed through policy at this time. Another important aspect is they really had a great discussion about the appropriate level of government oversight in this particular economy. Part of our discussions, as we literally took each type of housing piece by piece. We looked at market rate housing, we looked at condos, we looked at single family homes. And part of the conversations that they had were they came to a realization that a lot of this could be handled privately between the property owner, either a condo association bylaw or lease agreements. So a lot of our next steps will be to provide recommended language that could be inserted in lease agreements or condo association bylaws. Another interesting revelation as part of this process was the needed education that was really necessary. Some of the people that came to public comment seemed to believe that this was already allowed and that we were essentially looking at prohibiting it, not really understanding that our current policies don't allow it at all. So that was an important realization as well. The other factor, too, is that the city provides a robust resource of social services to assist people living in our community, including rental housing assistance and other forms of financial assistance, should there be unemployment present in a household or other certain types of financial burdens. We're very proud of that as well. We have a very robust program, and it allowed us the opportunity to educate our community about that as well, so that, that using services such as this is not the only way to augment income or to address a certain financial need. I'm happy to answer any questions.